calm down.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you. Spot really quick. How many of you guys release products, plugins, software? How many of you do client work? How many of you just work with plugins and WordPress sites? Awesome. It's a good balance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we handle plugin releases at Easy Digital Downloads and on my own products. This says a guide to managing release cycles, but really my experience is how to manage release cycles on an open source project without losing your sanity, loved ones, yourself along the way, because it's very easy to do. A little bit about me. I spent about 6 years at GoDaddy, 4.5 of it as a software developer. I worked in everything from C#, JavaScript, Node.js, PHP, did a lot of full stack development as well. About 2 years ago, started out contributing to Easy Digital Downloads, which is a WordPress plugin to help sell digital goods. After about almost 2 years of that, I came on full-time as the co-lead developer on January 1st of this year. So that was a big leap for me. I've also created quite a few plugins. The biggest one I have is Postmotor Pro, social media plugin for WordPress. I have 16, I think that's gone up since I wrote this, plugins on WordPress.org, and I talk about software development, WordPress, Easy Digital Downloads, and just general software lifecycle stuff at my domain, Kung Fu Grep, which if you know any Linux stuff is a kind of funny little play on words. So really, the big myth here is that shipping code is really easy. You get this nice little stack of boxes, everything's good to go, you think you tested everything, and it's great. And along the way, you found some really interesting bugs. Some people left some debugging code in there or something you never ran into, some bad data. But at the end of the day, what really ends up happening is you see customers do some really cool stuff with the stuff you built. I mean, think about it. How many times have you put your product out there or a site for a client and then went, wow, I can't believe it turned out that well. I can't believe the business is doing that well, something I did. It's kind of a turning moment for me when I saw my first checkout page of Easy Digital Downloads. As I started working on it, I worked on something that had to do with discount codes. And I went to the site and I saw, I'm like, my code is running this person's business. It's a really cool feeling. And it kind of makes you want to gather like a group of diverse friends and just get really excited about it. But when you work from home, your shipping days kind of look like that because Scotch is for shippers. That's kind of the WordPress mantra. And then your boss kind of looks at you and just gives you the nod. Yeah, good job. And it's quiet and silent, and there's nothing big. The biggest problem, though, is whenever you release something, you're inherently asking for feedback. You don't mean to, but if you release it to the public, people are going to tell you how they feel about it. And sometimes it's bad. It's just, you can't please everyone. And other times it's really, really bad. And you start to think, how did we get here? What brought us to this point of a failed release? And I'll tell you, I've seen it happen plenty of times. There are businesses that a failed release can cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Does anyone remember the story of, I can't remember the company's name right now, but they were a trading company who had a bug in their code and it basically bankrupted the company. They were losing $45,000 per minute, I think is the quote, per minute in stock trades because of one bug in one code. One server of 8. And it really boils down to process. So anyone that says that sane release cycles start with writing code, no one ever said that. Not a single person would believe that releasing good code starts with code. What it does start with is a process. And I know we all hate process, but process is what makes things work well and consistently well. Because the truth is that shipping good code is really complex. It's not easy. I know you guys are running into it right now. I've run into it right now. Easy Digital Downloads is running into it. We've had days where we release 2 versions in a single day because we just missed one small thing. That's all it takes, one small thing. But I've kind of accumulated some of the stuff that we use in our process that kind of makes sure that we don't run into those little bugs and have to ship 2 to 3 times a day. And that was my first job that when I came onto the team was I said, we need process. I know that we're an open source team. I know that only at the time, 3 of us are employed as employees here. The rest of them are all doing it on their own time. or contributing to open source projects. So relying on them and forcing them to fall in line is very difficult to do sometimes. But we need to do it if we're going to grow this as a business and as a product. So the first thing that you need to do is have it in version control. Git, SVN, heck, CVS if you're happy with that, which shouldn't be. If anyone knows what that is, move please. Get on SVN or Git. It's even important for a single project. How many people work on this stuff themselves? They don't have teammates. They don't, build anything just for yourself. Use Git. The reason I say to get it in version control is actually for 3 things. Versioning, the name's in there. Tagging, meaning that when you make a release, you can say, this is where my release is. This is what the code base looks like at this release. And you can tell what broke. One of the biggest things that you can do with Git and SVN is if someone says there's a bug in a line of code, you can actually go back through every commit to that section of the code and see what broke it, when it broke, how it broke. Could be a spelling error, could be a logic error, but you can actually go back in time. It's like a little time capsule for your code. So if you're not in version control, even for those one-off projects, get in version control. Something that we like to do is define our scope as early as possible. We know we can push 85 GitHub issues in a release. We also know we can push 105, but that was a really big release, and we don't like to do that. So we know our scope. We know about what point we need to cut any more features and just start moving those to the next version. So really kind of a big thing. Iterate as much as possible. You don't have to do it all at once. One of the other things we like to do is set a deadline. About halfway through a release, so when we're about halfway through all the issues that we have on it, we'll start to think about when we want this to go out. It's not a hard date. We aim for Wednesdays because it gives us 2 days before the weekend to really try and fix any bugs that come out. It's also the slowest day for our support team. So it's not just about saying, I want that arbitrary date. Think about when you're releasing things. Think about when you're delivering products, because the days you do it can negatively impact other sections of the process of the business. And humans love goals. We like dates. We like to see an end in sight. So it's really good to just kind of have that mark thinking out there in the background of, okay, well, I have to have it done by next Wednesday. And this one is kind of an interesting thing because up until January 1st, there was only one person with the final say on what made it into easy digital downloads. Now, he took everyone's input, he got feedback, there was discussions. But at the end of the day, my boss, Pippin, made the decisions on what went into the code base. Starting January 1st, I came on board. It's not designed by committee by any means, but there are discussions that happen. We kind of choose what makes it, what doesn't make it, and you have to make that role apparent to the rest of the team. You just can't accept every change. It's just not going to happen. Now you can take a change that you don't necessarily like and have them recraft it, build it up a little differently, come up with a better solution, but you do not have to accept every change into your code base. That's just not the way it works. Open source does not mean, oh, thanks for your contribution, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in there. That's not how that works. We don't have to do it. But those are the 4 main ones. I'd really like to dig into some really fine points because if anyone can name this guy, I will buy you a beer at the Irish Bar because I just found out about him last week. And I was writing up slides for this. Okay, cool. I'm not the only person. This guy's name is Robert Collier, and he was an author in like the early 1900s, which kind of obscure, but he wrote some really awesome books titled Be Rich, and there's an exclamation point after that, The Science of Getting What You Want. And his second book that I saw was Riches Within Your Reach, The Law of Higher Potential. It's like snake oil books, I swear. You can see them on like Barnes & Noble. But he had a really good quote that I thought was awesome. And it's that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. If you ask any entrepreneur, they don't get successful overnight. They continue process. Small changes here and there lead up to big, big changes. So that's like the biggest thing I can take away with this, and that's what these next ones are. These are the small things we do that really help us stay kind of on task and on board, so we're not so nervous when we make a release, because it's easy to be nervous. We milestone everything. Are anyone familiar with milestones in GitHub or anything? You can have issues, which are like your tasks, and you can have a milestone, which is these are all the tasks I want for this version. So whenever a new task is created in GitHub, an issue, we actually milestone it immediately. We say, okay, well, so-and-so user doesn't have to be part of the team. It can be a random person in the community creates an issue, a bug, a feature request. They'll put it in there, and we'll put a milestone on it right away. If we think it's a good idea, we'll say, okay, we'll milestone it for next version, the second we look at it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. When you have an open project, it's really easy to lose things in the noise. I think we're on issue 3,000 or 4,000 at this point that's been logged. So we put 86 issues into a release roughly. It's easy to lose one issue in the noise that never got milestone. A great example of this is the issue number 603. I remember it so well because it's the longest standing issue we've ever had open. It went 2.5 years without being fixed. You know, it wasn't really a fix. Nothing was really broken. It was an enhancement. But it sat for 2.5 years. That's, I think, something like 8 versions of Easy Digital Downloads, 8 major versions. And the only reason it sat there is because it was a really risky change. We needed to make sure it was backwards compatible. We also had to make sure it was forwards compatible, so if any changes got made in the future. We also had to make sure all of our major extensions worked with it. We have add-ons you can add on to the product. Those all had to work with it. So backwards compatibility was what was holding it back. Well, we kept punting it, saying, we don't have time, just punter, just kicking it down the road. And it brings us to our next great point. Punting is always a valid choice. If you are not ready to release it, don't release it. Whether that's client work, whether that's a product, if it's not there, don't do it. Just wait. You guys gave a great example. You guys are just holding off on all other aspects of it to move forward with bug fixing. It's awesome. It's a great mindset to have that I don't have to do all this other stuff. I can focus on this one thing that I need to do instead of worrying about all these other features that people are asking for. So it's a really good thing to be able to have the guts to punt someone's idea down the road. People get offended. We've had people say like, well, it's an easy change. Why don't you just do it? We've got better priorities. We've got higher priorities right now that we can't do this yet. And we can't do it right. And that's the easiest way to say it. If we can't do it right, we're not going to do it yet. We will get to it, but not now. A lot of these are GitHub specific because it's how we kind of manage things. Issues, again, have numbers. Whenever we make a commit into the code base, we put the issue number that the change is related to in the message of the commit. Because you always put a message in with your commit. What are you changing? What are you doing with this change set? We always put the number of the issue in the commit because it makes an inline comment inside of the issue's log history, which is very important when someone comes back to you and says, why did we make this change right here? Why did we change this? We can go look at that history I was talking about earlier and say, well, it was changed on issue 42. Let's go look at issue 42. Okay, issue 42 found a bug in this. It kind of lets us know why we changed it previously and be able to trace it back to why we changed it and know that we have to be cognizant of what that change was and what our new change is. So we always tag everything with a number on it so we know how to trace it back through the enhancements or the bug fixes. And that brings us to unit testing as well. Who knows unit testing? I know they did a talk on this group the first week. Anyone use unit testing? Okay. Unit testing is code to test code, short way to put it. It's if I give a function an expected input or a known input, I know what the output should be. Very important when you have a large code base that a lot of people are touching. We have, I think, 108 contributors to our open source project. So at any given time, 108 people have made a code change to our product. So they don't know the intricacies. They may just see very short-sighted their one little change in this box, but that could actually affect something down the line. Our biggest area with this is taxation. Has anyone ever dealt with taxation and writing code for taxes? Don't do it. If you're going to write something that is e-commerce, just avoid taxes completely if you can, because taxes are nasty. The rounding makes all the difference, and you never know if you're doing it the right way or the wrong way, I swear. But there have been times where we make one tiny change to a tax, like a tax function, and next thing you know, our unit tests are all broken because it breaks down the line. But it's important to know that because now instead of me having to manually test everything, this is an automated process. There's no room for human error in the unit test. It's if I give my code this price, does the right tax come out on the other end? And yes or no. And so there's no middle ground. There's no, well, 90% of the time it did not work. So if you can get into unit testing and even front-end testing, we were talking about that earlier over there. If you can get into testing your front-end stuff, it's also very important. If I click this button, does it go to the expected page? Does the URL match? Does the color match? Does the style match? Like, these are all things that you need to kind of check for in release cycles. Who's ever heard of a code review? Awesome. Code reviews are great because it's basically like saying, here's all my work, now tell me what I did wrong. Because you're too close to the woods. Whenever you're too close to the trees, you can't see through anything. You're right there. At GoDaddy, this was a big thing that my team was huge on. Before you do any releases, before you commit into the production release, you have someone else review as much of it as possible, whether that's testing it manually, whether that's reading over the code, and we do that too. People will sit there and read over the code line by line and tell you, oh, it's not always bad. Sometimes they're like, this looks great, perfect, thank you, appreciate it. Or they say, this is good, I see some improvements, and that's how it usually ends up. And then you've got times where people are like, this is terrible, I'm not doing it, I will not merge it. In GitHub, we have what we call a pull request. A pull request is someone else wanting to give us a change set into our code base. And the hard times are when you look at someone who spent hours on this. We have a product for software licensing that allows you to sell WordPress products or even just regular software, and they get a license key with it. And that license key allows them to continue to use the product. We made a huge change to it, or had a huge change idea, and some guy wrote up an entire change set. We're talking hours of work. And we looked at it and said, this does work. Functionally, this is right. But we don't think it's done the right way on the back end. To the user, it wouldn't have made a difference to the user. But on the back end, there was a more performant, efficient, and more manageable way to do it. So telling someone that after 3-4 hours of work that, I'm sorry, the code just does not quite make the cut is difficult. But he was a great sport and said, you know what, I like the idea you had, because we gave him an alternative. And he's like, that's a great idea, I'm gonna do it that way. But without the code review process, we would have just merged it and gone with it. So it's important to have someone look over your code. And you could be the best coder in the world, but you'll miss something. You always do. It's the nature of our jobs. Anyone ever heard of this term, eating your own dog food? It's a great term. I love it because it makes me laugh every time I hear the origin story of it. Apparently, there's 2 origin stories that are possibly true, and I don't know if they're real. But one of the early Alpo commercial spokesperson, Alpo's a dog food, pet food, said, I feed it to my own dogs, which was his endorsement of the product. I think I like this one better, the Calcan, which anyone seen Back to the Future? Calcan is like the food that's just piling up for Einstein. The president used to eat it himself in front of shareholder meetings. I'm like, I smell that stuff every day with my dogs. I don't know if I'd eat it. But in the tech industry, it was first used in around 1988 by a test manager at Microsoft for their Land Manager product. And he entitled an email to his entire team called Eating Our Own Dog Food. And what it really means is using your product as a user. It's very important that as a developer or creator or designer, that you use what you're building as a user. Because we get caught up in building it, and oh, well, I know that if I click on this, it's going to do this because I built it. It's going to do it. Users don't think that way. Users see a button. Users see a link. Users see a menu. They don't see what it could do, what it should do. They just know that I got to click that. They don't know the expected result, and they shouldn't have to. We should be giving that to them. One of the things we do at EDD, Easy Digital Downloads, I shorten it to EDD because it's a mouthful. We do release candidates, and we do beta versions. Betas come out first, and then release candidates are kind of finalizing. We actually start using the next release on our site, on our own site, before the betas go out. What it does is lets us catch bugs earlier. We have a much larger code base or user base than a lot of our customers do. So if we can see it, we can identify it faster. Who better to have find the bugs than the people that develop it? Instead of having a client try and tell you what's wrong with their site, it's broken. I don't know why it's broken, but it's broken. We can tell why it's broken because it's on our own site. Before we even go to a beta, we will run it on all 3 of our sites that are live, that do sales for us. And I run it on all mine as well before we even go to beta. And because it's important. It's important for us to see it. It's important for us to use it. And I think by eating our own dog food, we identify pain points for customers pretty quickly. They'll tell us it's wrong. Another one that we've most recently been working on is communication. Anytime you make a change to a customer-facing product, communication is the key. People hate change. It could be a change for the better. It could be a great change that, basically makes your product go from 0 to 100 in sales a day. But it's a change, and people hate change, even if it's for the better. And it's because it changes the process. It changes their happy little corner of the internet. And we use that blog posts, tweets, Facebook posts, email lists. If you have an email list, tell everyone about your change immediately, because people read email. It's easy to miss a tweet or a Facebook post, but they typically open their email at least once a day or all the time on your phone. And screenshots, video casts, YouTube videos, anything to tell them about a major change that's coming to what their interface will look like weeks in advance. Just prepare them for it. It may not stop all the bad feedback that you're going to get, but it'll at least lessen it. So it's kind of important to communicate. Another thing we do, and this is again GitHub related, is we protect the master branch. A lot of people work in master is like bleeding edge, the nightly release. This is what, if you wanted to see what we're working on right now, you pull down the master branch. We don't do that. We actually do what they call issue and release branches to do all of our, any single issue has its own little corner of the code base. Every release has a corner of the code base. And if an issue belongs in a future release, we move from issue to release. And it only goes into the master when it's ready to go live. Nothing should ever be in your prod branch or master branch until it's been tested and ready to go. And the reason is, if you find a security fix that has to go out today, and your prod branch or master branch has untested code in it, pulling that code out is a nightmare. You don't want to have to figure out all those changes you made, pull them out, and then just put your one security fix in. Anyone remember the query args release? It's like the day in WordPress when there was something like, I think it was April 27th. I have that date in my head. No, it wasn't April 27th. I think it was April 23rd or something like that. But something like 15 plugins on WordPress.org got automatically updated. And I released 37 plugin updates that day on our own, all because of one little bug in WordPress. And the way that WordPress documented one function, it didn't have a security escaping on it, a security check on it. And everyone was using it by the documentation. That was the bad part. The documentation was wrong. But we all were relying on the documentation to use it correctly. And we had one of our extensions for Easy Digital Downloads, one of our add-ons, that someone had pushed untested code into the master branch. And I had to release a security fix that day. And I'm like, I need you to go rip out all that code because it's not going live today. I cannot push that live if no one's tested it. And he's like, no, I won't do it. So Pip and I ganged up on him. We're like, you have to pull it out. We can't do this. It's untested. You rewrote like 80% of the plugin. I'm not going to let you push that because I have a one-line change. I'm sorry. So it was a nightmare. It took us a good hour to get it done. But that's why we always say, never push it to master if it's not ready for the public eye. Who hates bug fixes as a change log item? Does anyone look at change logs? I look at change logs. When I see my freaking iPhone, it's like, oh, what did you fix? Bug fixes. I'm like, what? Please be transparent in your change logs. Tell people what you fixed. It gives them a sense of trust. Like when I see bug fixes, I'm like, what are you hiding? Why aren't you telling me what you fixed? I think it's just a good notion as a developer to tell people what you're doing, which is why you'll never see bug fixes on anything I do. I'll tell you what I did. That's fine. Even if it's security related. But that one's just kind of like my #1 pet peeve. And I literally put that #1 pet peeve. Can't stand it. And my last one is kind of, has anyone seen the Facebook mantra of I can't say it because we're on Google Hangouts right now and I'll get banned. It's F it, ship it. Just at some point you have to hit the button, whether it's a blog post, whether it's code, whether it's, you know, writing up your LLC paperwork and submitting it. Just do it. Stop holding yourself back. Use a bunch of these things that I've talked about. All these little minor things make it much easier for me to just push the buttons. You know, I feel better that my unit test passed. I feel better that I don't have untested code in the branch I'm about to push live to customers. I feel better that we've, you know, put a good scope of change in here. I feel better that we've communicated my changes live. It makes this process a heck of a lot easier. My first release on Easy Digital Downloads, we do at least three releases a week, not just on Easy Digital Downloads, but between all of our plugins and extensions and everything, 3 releases a week. So managing that and feeling good about it every time, it's not always easy, but process makes me a much more confident developer. And I hate to say that, but the management's right. If you can write it all down and have it in a process and documented, it's much easier to feel comfortable pushing code live. That's pretty much all I got. If you have any questions, I am open. I know it was really kind of GitHub related, but that's kind of our process. So I'll answer any questions you guys have.
Are you at the point where you're requiring issues before you take code into?
We are starting to get there. We have had contributors try and give us code that don't have an issue, and some of them we're kind of accepting it because it's minor changes. But if there is, if it's a pretty big change, we're asking for them to create an issue first and then reference the issue in the pull request. It just makes it easier to track on our end. But yeah, recently how we've been doing that is just tagging, milestoning the pull request they give us, which is not always a great way to do it. This kind of gets confusing later in the game. So, but yeah, that's a really good question. We are trying to get to that point. So, yeah.
Any experience with Docker?
I have not used Docker yet. I've been hearing good things about Docker.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the commits are great.
Okay. All right, I'll check out Docker. I'll do that tonight. When you say the commits are great, what do you?
I actually just started working with it. I'm not really like a WordPress guy.
That's fine.
I'm just with him. He's kind of the WordPress guru. I'm more of like an OpenStack administrator. So I do like OpenStack, SUSE Linux, stuff like that.
Okay.
And we actually just started working with OpenStack and trying to push in Docker with it.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a thing that's kind of becoming relevant now as Docker is getting more traction.
Sure.
So we've been going through some of the things with Docker and doing some of like the videos with some of the vendors from Docker. It's like, it's confusing how it works. Like the little tutorial, like a 10-step tutorial.
Right.
And the way that it works, I don't know, it has its own kind of like command structure, but the way that it works, you can just kind of push everything to whatever you want, regardless of version, regardless of operating system, regardless of anything. So it's weird how it works, but it works.
So that's more of if you're doing like an enterprise, yeah, okay. Yeah, that I really wish I would have had one of those when I was at GoDaddy. I ran a WordPress site that ran off 36 servers. So it's a single WordPress install across 36 servers sharing database on the back end. It would have been, how we had to do it was build an RPM and deploy the RPM. It's a Red Hat package manager. It's basically like we packaged our website as an application in Linux and said, Linux, here's my website, deploy it. That's dumbing it down way more than what the guys actually did. They were geniuses, but that would have been so awesome to have back then.
They're changing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're actually migrated towards OpenStack.
Okay.
And then we're compiling all big data with Hadoop, and then we brought in people from Puppet.
Okay.
So we're actually.
Where are you at?
I'm at GoDaddy.
Are you really? Okay, we should talk. Okay. I was there for quite a while. So, what group do you work with?
I just work with the server team right now. So that's my.
Okay.
That's my kind of area.
Very cool.
Servers and all that stuff, but yeah, it's all changing.
Okay, that's awesome. Good to hear. Yeah.
When you're dealing with your unit testing, and you have like a lot of like database issues, do you have like sets of test data that you're using for all that, or are you like simulating all your data?
Yeah. So
that in?
It runs off it. So in theory, the WordPress unit test system is not a true unit test. I will say that up front. People will probably scorn me for it. A unit test, all data should be mocked. You should never have a database involved with a unit test. It should just be testing the code with mocked up data by the design of unit testing. However, the WordPress system actually still does hit the MySQL database. It generates, there's something called the factory. And actually, Pippin's plugins, he just wrote a really good tutorial on what the factory is. So the WordPress core unit test has this thing built in where you can just say, this create post, and it will insert a WordPress post. And then that's what we use to create all of our downloads and all that stuff. So we are actually, every single time you run the test, it builds the database up, installs the database, and then when it's done, it deconstructs the system. It removes all the tables, all the inputs, all the structure. So it does that on every run of PHP unit. So it's not efficient, but we're running it all locally, and then we hook up to Travis CI to do our matrix. So I think it's something like 32 different versions or something like that. So yes, it's all created on the fly, mocked. I'd love to be able to mock it and just have it always be the same, but technically it is the same, just relies on the database, which I don't like. It is what it is. So are you guys mocking data in your unit testing?
We don't do any testing.
Not yet.
Okay.
You're getting it though, right? You're getting it.
Someday.
Yeah. Unit testing is always the someday.
Yeah.
Until you do it and you're like, it saves you a bug and you're like, yes, I'm so glad we did unit testing. Anyone else?
You mentioned front-end testing and passing, and I don't think that was anything that we talked about in our
Oh yeah. So
class.
Selenium is what I've used in the past. Selenium, I use it as a Firefox plugin, but there's an entire command line interface too for Selenium, but I use it as a Firefox plugin. And what it is in code unit testing, you say, if I give it this function, this data, I expect it to equal this when it comes out. Front-end testing is when I click on this button, I expect, or if I load this page, look at this source, find something with this class, and click on it. When I click it, I expect to end up at this web page, at this URL. Or if I click this button and it fires Ajax, I expect this div to show up. So it's really just making sure that your front-end, like click points and classes exist and things like that. So you can kind of also see that your expected render happens. So it's kind of cool to watch happen too. Like you just click play and sit back, and your browser's like bouncing around and clicking on things. You can even have a delay, certain amounts. It's pretty cool. You can clear cookies with it, set cookies with it. So if you need to log in, you can type in passwords and things like that too. So if I use Selenium, I think it's called Selenium. I forget the name of the Firefox plugin. If you search Selenium Firefox, it'll come up. It's pretty cool. And then you can record the clicks too. You don't have to like type it all. Just say hit record and then start going. And do it. So it's pretty sweet. Anything else? Awesome. Well, I'll be hanging out. So if you have any questions later. Cool. Thank you.